You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh, that's more like it, isn't it? We're already having fun here, Jack. We're already having fun. All smiles, all laughs, baby. T-Wolves come out the gate swinging. They punch the Warriors in the gut at home without Steph Curry in game 2. Check this out, 117-93. That's your final 24-point victory. Julius Randle, team high 24. Now, just like that, Jack, things all tied up. Back at one apiece. Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here at the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Again, Jack Borman with me as always, live from the Target Center. Give him a follow on X at JRBorman13. Jack, I mean, you know, we talked about it at length at nauseum. Wolves couldn't have played worse in that game one. We know that. Tonight, though, and I know we'll pick apart the little nuances, but by and large, they came out of the gate swinging. They landed punch after punch. They run away with this thing. They win by 24. How huge was that just for momentum? And let me flip things around here for a second here. Let's switch it up. How are you feeling if you're Golden State right now, knowing that this is what it looked like without Steph Curry, who's going to be out at least 2 to 3 more games?
Yeah, I think you've got to be on edge a little bit, because I think, you know, just thinking about this, I mean, after game 4, the Warriors will have played 9 playoff games in 16 days with no more than 1 day of rest in between. And half of those rest days have been travel days. So the Warriors haven't really had a whole lot of time to rest. And now, you know, you're going to be down Steph Curry, who's, you know, one of the best, most well-conditioned athletes on the planet. And, you know, it's just going to put more of the burden on Jimmy and Draymond, and both those guys looked exhausted in the fourth quarter. And I think that's going to be a huge factor as we get into this now. I think, you know, that was kind of what we were talking about coming into the series, and then it kind of got put in the background when Steph got hurt. But I think it's back in the foreground now. I just looking at, I mean, Buddy Hield was the only guy who looked like he still had a lot of juice. And then, you know, Steve Kerr found a few things off the bench with Jonathan Kuminga and Trace Jackson Davis, we'll get into. But yeah, I think, again, like, you can't be feeling great if you're a Warriors fan either, because Draymond is fortunate that he didn't get thrown out of this game. Picked up his 5th technical. If he gets 2 more, he will be suspended for a game. And that seems likely at this point, because he's been getting either a flagrant foul point or a technical in almost every game of this playoffs. And if he gets 2 additional flagrant foul points, he would also be suspended a game. And those are separate counters. So he could theoretically get a flagrant 2 and then get a technical and get thrown out, and then would get suspended. Wow. And then if he came back after that, got another technical, he would be suspended again. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I just think, again, for the Warriors, the only thing you really didn't want to see happen for the Wolves is them kind of find the touch from 3. And they certainly did that tonight. I mean, coming back from quite literally the worst 2-game stretch in playoff history, shooting from 3, 12 of 76, 16%, you know, found it again tonight, 16 of 36, 44.5%. Timberwolves now 5-0 in the playoffs when they take at least 36 threes. So I think, you know, we talked last show about just the problematic, you know, shooting percentage from 3, but I think it's a volume thing as much as it is anything, because I think, you know, when they're able to generate more threes, it's because, you know, it's a downstream effect of just them playing more downhill, getting the ball moving, getting the defense in rotation, and really sharing the ball. So I think all in all, you got to be feeling pretty dispirited, I think, if you're a Warriors fan, and you just feels like you're kind of hoping and praying that Steph will be back for game 5, because you know, the Timberwolves didn't play great tonight by any stretch of the imagination. They won by 25. So there's just no guarantee, if you're a Warriors fan, that there's going to even be a game 6 if you know, if that's the game Steph would be back for.
Yeah, 100% good breakdown there. Lots to get into. Biggest turning point from this one, our game MVP, plus a little preview of games 3 and 4 back in Golden State. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time, download that Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So quick little recap, Wolves-Warriors game 2. Obviously, Wolves come out completely different energy than they did in game 1. Couldn't start any better. Up 13-0 right off the bat. They dominate the first quarter 29-17. Ant goes down with that ankle injury in the second quarter. And obviously, that's when things get sweaty, right? We're used to him bouncing back, but, he's sitting there holding that ankle, shaking his head. Didn't look great. Warriors cut the lead in half. And the Wolves, with that great 3-ball that you talked about, that we'll do a deep dive about, but that great defense, that they kind of ride out the Warriors wave after they cut the lead in half, and they kind of take care of business. So again, they win by 24, 117-93. They take game 2. They tie this thing back up. But big picture, Jack, I always like to start big picture. What a great bounce back win. Let's talk about that 3-ball maybe a little bit more, because it just started falling. And I think you and I talked about sometimes you just got to see it fall a couple times just to remember. It's like making those 3-foot putts. 16 for 37 tonight. That was so huge, 42%. They survived also this Anthony Edwards injury scare after he went to the locker room, and they run away with it, winning by 24 points. So how are we feeling now from the T-Wolves lens? What are the vibes in that locker room, and what's on Coach Finch's mind? And how do we feel about going into Golden State now for games 3 and 4 as well?
Yeah, I think the vibes have got to be great in that locker room. I mean, I was in there before the game talking to, Mike, talking to, Nas a little bit, caught up with Nikhil and Dante too. I think Dante, white smoke was billowing out of Target Center tonight. Obviously, the new Pope might have called the big man upstairs for a fellow Villanova alumnus to get Dante DiVincenzo back on the board tonight. His first game with at least 3 made triples since the season finale against Utah. And so, Dante came in the locker room and was just saying, "Oh, V's up, baby, V's up" for Villanova, and was saying he was locked in on the Papal Conclave this afternoon. So I think the vibes have to be great. I mean, you consider too that you look down at the bench as well, and Luke, how long has it been since all 3 of those bench guys have had a really tangible, strong impact on the game, especially with their scoring and shooting? I think, for so long, it's maybe been 1.5 of those guys have showed up. Like it's been one guy's had
either a Nas Reed night
points,
or a DDV night or a Na night. It's never all 3 at the same time.
And I think it was really important for the Timberwolves to get all 3 of those guys in the game. As scorers was fantastic for the Wolves tonight. I mean, they had 38 bench points, won that battle 38-35, but all 3 of them made at least 3 threes, and all 3 of them had at least 9 points. So, and then they also contributed in other ways. They all had at least 3 assists. They all, had 3 and 2 rebounds. And they were flying around defensively as well. So I think that was a really important thing for the Wolves. And I think, again, it's just emblematic of, of the ball movement that the Timberwolves had tonight. I mean, how many, 6, 7, 8, 9 pass possessions did we see tonight that we just didn't necessarily see in game 1? I think a lot of people after game 1 were probably a little quick to say, it's just, shooting variance, or, the law of averages are going to come work back around. I just thought the Timberwolves took a lot of static threes as a way to describe them, where there just wasn't a whole lot of movement, whether it was ball movement, player movement, screening, cutting, those types of things that created those 3-point shots. It was just, catch and shoot from a standstill or step backs at the end of the shot clock that were just troublesome. And I think kind of inhibit you from getting into a flow and a shooting rhythm offensively. But tonight, just the way that the ball flew around was super important and great to see. The Timberwolves had 31 assists on 41 buckets tonight. That's their best mark of the playoffs. And the Wolves in the regular season were 13-4 when they had at least 30 dimes. That's like a 73 win percentage, or 73% win percentage, which is obviously a great number to be at. It probably puts you, I haven't done the math, it probably puts you near the 60 win mark, right? Or above the 60 win mark, extrapolating over a 82 game regular season pace. So yeah, I think that was really important, and it was nice to see that the Timberwolves were still able to manufacture a ton of threes despite Anthony Edwards only taking 4 of them, right? And I think we can.
What's the average a night? 10 to 12?
Yeah, right about that for sure. And so I think there was a certain guy that I think had a few things to do with that. If you want to hit that cue,
let's do it. Here we go.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, Jack, good segue here. Tee you up today's game MVP for the Wolves. Who was it and why?
Yeah, very unsurprisingly tonight, it was fairly obvious. Julius Randle was fantastic in this game. I think, we talked all of last series about Julius Randle when things kind of got a little off kilter, whether it be emotionally, physically, just with the game going on, with runs, what have you. He found a way to just steady the ship, right? And he totally did that again tonight. I thought, he had a strong start to this game. Helped get Mike Conley going with a three off the bat. But I thought that his play really kind of took a turn for the better once Anthony Edwards got hurt. I think, there was kind of some angst in the arena. Like, look, I've seen Ant turn his ankle and leave the game and limp back to the locker room probably 10 or 15 different times this season. And that might be a conservative estimate. And there was a different kind of air and angst in the crowd in this game. I think, especially considering it was a playoff game. Some people were seeing the replay and saw Trace Jackson Davis just completely landed on his foot and ankle. And I thought it was so important for Julius in those moments to just really kind of grab control of the rope. And that's exactly what he did. In the first two possessions, after Anthony Edwards got hurt around the 6-minute mark with the Wolves up 18, the Warriors scored right away. And then Randle comes down immediately, hits a self-created bucket, and then sets up a Dante DiVincenzo three. And that kind of breathed some life back in the building and said, okay, Ant might be down, but I got this. I proved in the last series that I can do this. I can totally carry an offense for a stretch. We don't know how long Ant's going to be out. I'm just going to put my head down, kind of grab my lunch pail and go to work. And that's exactly what he did. And I thought the way that Julius Randle, set good screens and forced switches to get onto some of the smaller guys like Brendan Pajemski and Buddy Hield at the nail, and then kind of had those isolation, face-ups at the nail in the middle of the floor, where it then forced the defense to collapse on him. And then he just made excellent kick-out passes all night long. Julius Randle had 11 assists, a career high for him as a Minnesota Timberwolf. Second game this season with at least 10. He had 10 before the fourth quarter even started. And for Julius, 8 of those 11 assists were threes, which I think was really important. That's kind of a theme that we've talked about throughout the season, that when Julius Randle is really rolling, that's when he's getting downhill. He's either finishing inside through contact, getting to the free throw line, but also then kicking the ball out and generating a lot of those threes, even if he's not taking many himself. And so I think that was super important for the Wolves, and that'll continue to be really important, because the fact of the matter is that the Warriors just don't really have anybody that can defend him straight up like that. And, Jimmy Butler has taken that assignment a decent amount in this series, but with how much the Warriors are switching, especially with this small ball five, Draymond started on Randle tonight, and they just continued to switch almost everything. And Draymond really wants to be more of a free safety than, a slot corner that's covering a guy in man-to-man coverage. And so because of that, you're just not going to see Draymond on Randle a whole lot. And he's going to have these opportunities to create mismatches and either score inside or create open three-point shots. So I think the Wolves just need to see a whole lot more of that throughout the course of this series, because he's just a guy that totally wears down a defense. And I think obviously when you consider no Steph, that means Jimmy and Draymond have to do more offensively, but those guys are so, unlike a lot of stars, especially with, Luka in the last series, like those two guys are so important to what they need to do defensively, and they need to win this series on the defensive end of the floor. And so, having a guy like Julius that can really wear those guys down over a course of a game, not even accounting for Ant or Nas or, Jaden getting downhill and playing in space. So some of those things, I just think he's so important to what they need to do in this series. And I think tonight was kind of the template for, for what I'd like to see from him moving forward. So he was tremendous.
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. So fun to watch him when he's firing on all cylinders. Like he has really. Jack, what are the Wolves' record now going back to the regular season, the last, 12, 15, 20 games? Because it's got to be, if not the best in the league, it's got to be up there, top 2, top 3.
Yeah, it's right up there. I don't know what it is off the top of my head or what
something like
season.
I want to say it's something like 15-3, 14.
Yeah, I want to say in their last 30 games, they're probably pretty darn close to 25-5.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And my point was why I brought that up. Julius has been a huge part of that. Let's go to our first First commercial break. Plenty more deep dive, including our biggest turning point. That's all coming up, though, right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel is giving you a chance at a huge return, $250 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Why I love FanDuel. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $250 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get in some NBA future action while you're there. T-Wolves were minus 10.5 to win this one. They crushed that, to say the least. They won by 24. We'll see what the spread is up on FanDuel tomorrow morning. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com, though. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $250 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So again, Jack, you can't really start any better if you're the Wolves, especially after that game 1 loss. Up 13 rip right out the gate. Warriors started like 0 of 9. Nobody made a bucket outside of Jimmy Butler the first 7-8 minutes. They're up 14 after the first quarter, 17 after 2 going into the locker room. But, you know, the big question was at that point, would Ant return? He did. Warriors did cut the lead in half. They got things down to, I want to say single digits. If not, it was a 10-point. Was it 7? Okay, thank you. Wolves come right back, though. I think it was a 15-8 run of their own. And then from there, from that point, it felt like they just kind of rode out the current there, and they rode out, you know, the Warriors' last punch, their last little tank of gas they had left, and from there it was kind of smooth sailing after that. Take it away, though. You tell us, biggest turning point in this one. What was the moment, I guess, you said to yourself, all right, we got this one in the bag, this one's over? When was it and why?
It was when Jaden McDaniels made the first 3 of the game.
Okay.
That was the first one. I mean, that was the biggest turning point for me, because I think there was so much air that got let out of the collective anxiety balloon when that first 3 went down after that. I think that was just all right, like, let's just settle down. We're all fine. And then Mike Conley steps up and makes another one. Boom, it's 6-0.
That rattler, the one that just rattled. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that totally, I mean, you may not have felt it on TV. And if I was watching this game on TV, I would have a different turning point for you. But being in the arena, I just think there was so much more confidence coming into this game after that moment. And I think, again, for to be someone other than Ant or Julius was really important too, because you know that those guys are going to have plenty of opportunities to make an impact on the game offensively. But yeah, I think that was crucial considering how they've shot the last 2 games. But if you want another one, I think it was when Dante DiVincenzo made a corner 3 to put the Wolves up 10 around the 6-minute mark of the third quarter. So Naz Reid, possession previous, came down and hit a 3 to take it from 7 to 10. And then Jonathan Kuminga, who was fantastic in this game for the majority of it for the Warriors, hit a 3 to get it back down to 7. And you're thinking, all right, are the Warriors going to make this a little more interesting than it should? And I think then Dante comes back down, hits kind of a corner 3 falling back into the bench. And that just kind of settled everything back down. The crowd got super loud after that, and it ignited a 20-7 run to close the quarter. And so instead of the Timberwolves only, being up 7 at that point, they were up 20 at the end of the third quarter. And you were just kind of saying, all right, let's just tread water here for 4 minutes. And Steve Kerr is going to then pull the plug rather early because of the rest situations that we've talked about. And that was what happened. So yeah, I think Dante was super important. And look, he also was a factor earlier on in this game when he first checked into the ball game. I mean, he just was shot out of a cannon. He had 3 offensive rebounds and had 2 assists to set up open threes off of those offensive rebounds, but also set up 2 or 3 other wide open looks with some laser passes to Naz across the court, to Ant across the court. And that was really important for the Timberwolves, just to find some more of that, kind of energy and rhythm that he does such a great job of creating over the course of a game. And even if he's not shooting it super well, I still think the way that he's able to, kind of put his imprint on the game, I think is really a huge asset for the Timberwolves. And I think that's a big reason why Chris Finch continues to trust him, even if his shot isn't falling at the rate that, he certainly showed that it can over the course of the regular season. So, and I think just part of that kind of defensive wave of energy that he created as well earlier on after he set up an Ant 3 and on a second chance, did a great job coming back, getting a steal that led to a Jaden transition, or either a Jaden or an Akil transition bucket. And Steve Kerr called his first time out. And I just thought, especially in that first half, the Wolves did a fantastic job of playmaking on the defensive end of the floor. Through a quarter and a half, the Timberwolves had more stocks, steals and blocks, 9, than they did fouls. And Ant and Jaden McDaniels had 8 of those 9. And those two were both tremendous. I mean, Jaden had 3 steals and 3 blocks tonight, was just all over the place.
Jaden had 3 blocks before halftime.
Yeah, and Ant himself had 3 steals before halftime. So I think the way that those two guys were flying around was great. And just sticking on the defensive end of the floor, I thought the Wolves also did a great job of not letting Buddy Hield into the game. And that was in part due to the way that Chris Finch kind of had their defensive alignment set up. And I think that, again, Mike Conley's been really good since he's been with the Wolves in that chaser role where he kind of runs 3-point shooters around. And so he did a great job running Buddy Hield off the 3-point line and not letting him get comfortable early on. And then from there, once Jimmy Butler came out of the game, Jaden McDaniels shifted onto him and did a great job. And then once Jaden came out of the game and Nikhil was out there, Nikhil did an awesome job of making Buddy Hield uncomfortable. And Buddy Hield is just not a guy that likes to put the ball on the floor and finish at the rim. Buddy Hield in this game, I think, was just 1 of 5 on twos. And I think he was like 1 of 8 or 1 of 9 in game 1. So I think the more the Wolves can just force him to play below the arc, I think it's going to be relatively easy to shut his water off as long as their off ball, defensive discipline is there. So, yeah, I think, again, the turning point for me was that first 3 of the game, but you can certainly look at some other points of, Dante making that shot and then the defense really kind of getting into the flow of things in that third quarter and did a little bit better job of running off of those stops in that third quarter.
For sure. Well said there. I want to go back to this comment by Sick Boy. Steve Kerr basically just admitted today he was basically throwing everything at the wall, see what sticks. I expect he'll lean into the sticky stuff much more in game 3. So basically, I mean, Steve Kerr played, 14 different players tonight? It really did feel like that. I like the way this is worded. It felt like at a certain point, I'm just throwing things at the wall. And I know he's done this all year, but I'm just throwing things at the wall and seeing what's going to stick without Steph Curry. From what you've seen now in the last 6 quarters of play, what has stuck for Steve Kerr, I guess, if anything, for them? And now what could we see from that, I guess, moving forward until Steph returns?
Yeah, I actually disagree with that Steve Kerr is going to that Steve Kerr
just wing it, just wing it.
Well, I think there is a method to his madness. I think Steve Kerr, I was talking about it with a couple of guys at halftime that, I think Steve Kerr is like a professional chef, right? And that as all of us as amateur chefs, we may see ingredients on the table and think that they're going to be used one way. And then the chef just starts kind of getting into it and approaching it from a totally different way that we just have no idea what's going on. But there's clearly some type of plan in how they're doing it. And I think even if he is just throwing guys against the wall and seeing if it sticks, that in and of itself is a plan. That they're just going to throw a bunch of different guys out there that the Wolves haven't necessarily game planned for, with a bunch of different lineups that Steve kind of knows at least what they're going to be able to do for short 2 and 3 minute bursts. And I think that's what he did tonight. That's what he did a lot of in game 1. I think in game 1, 13 different guys played. And tonight, every single player on their roster that was available for tonight's game played in this game. And Steve Kerr is going to continue to do that. I mean, this is from Sam Gordon, who covers the Warriors for the San Francisco Chronicle, who does a great job and is from Minneapolis. Great dude. Said the game plan tonight was to go deep into the bench for short burst minutes, content to limit Jimmy Butler to 34 minutes and Draymond to 29. Steve Kerr said, quote, "I didn't want to chase this game unless it was really gettable," end quote. And so, you read that and you say, like, okay, that was the strategy here, but that's also what they did in the second half of game 1, right? And I think that part of that is him thinking that the Wolves are just not really going to be able to react and adapt the right way to all these different types of lineups. And they're going to have issues communicating with one another about, okay, who's got who in transition, getting matched up. And then also just having enough bodies that are, somewhat fresh to get out there and be able to run, right? Because the only chance the Warriors have in this series is if they're able to run and create points in transition. And so I think you need to be able to have a bunch of different guys in there that are somewhat fresh to do that, especially with the context of the rest situation that we've talked about throughout this game. But yeah, I think Steve Kerr, sticking with the rotation, kind of some different things here. Like Jonathan Kuminga was 6 of 28 in the playoffs coming into tonight. That's from Dave McMenamin, and he started 7 of 7 tonight. I think he did end up finishing leading the Warriors in scoring with 18 points tonight. And then, Jimmy had 17, but right behind him was Trace Jackson Davis off the bench, who was kind of a more athletic rim running 5 compared to, Kevon Looney's kind of a more burly, rolling, diving big. And I think, that kind of bolt of energy that Jackson Davis provided was important for them on the offensive glass, had 2 or 3 putbacks, had an alley-oop that he finished from Jimmy. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he starts. If he starts game 3, him or Kuminga, because one of those guys is not going to come off the bench in the next game with how important they were for Golden State tonight. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is that those 2 guys have kind of risen above the rest of those guys on the bench. But outside of that, I think almost everybody's going to play at least at some point.
And just circling back too, because I like your argument there about Steve Kerr being that Michelin, 5-star chef, right? He's the professional chef. There's a method to his madness, but he also lost by 24 points tonight. So does that mean that the ingredients just aren't working for him? Like without Steph, that, the ingredients that you gave me, I can make a peanut butter and jelly, but I can't give you this Michelin 5-star meal that you were hoping for at this point, because it looks just in game 1, to your point, in game 1, when Steph was out those last 2 quarters 3 and 4, it did look like a Michelin 5-star meal. All of a sudden in game 2, was that just more the Wolves playing so badly that it made that grilled cheese look elevated a little bit, right? And you're charging $29.99 for this and a side of potato chips? Like, I'm still trying to figure out what we're going to get is my point. We'll talk about this in the next segment, but what we're going to get in games 3 and 4, what it's all going to look like once the dust settles here a little bit, because there's just such polar opposites of what we sat down and viewed in game 1 from the Wolves to game 2. That's all.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I mean, I think that both things can be true, right? I think Steve Kerr deserves a ton of credit for kind of confusing the Wolves and not letting them get into any type of rhythm in terms of what lineups they were facing in the second half without Steph Curry. But I also do think that at a certain point, like the talent advantage that the Wolves have, which is so significant, especially on the offensive end of the floor for these Warriors, because Draymond Green, he's a first ballot Hall of Fame player. He's arguably the greatest defensive player that has ever played the game of basketball. For all of his greatness, I mean, he's just not much of a scorer. He can do a lot in terms of setting guys up with off-ball screens and getting into DHOs and all these different things to help make the game easier for other guys to score. But part of his greatness was that he unlocked scoring and made it easier for guys like Steph and Clay and Kevin Durant. And, and they just, I mean, Jimmy Butler also wants to be more of a guy that's doing a lot of that at this stage of his career. And don't get me wrong, like Jimmy still has a night where, has a game where he could score 35, 40 points, but like, when he gets in the lane, he just doesn't want to shoot contested layups the same way that Luka or LeBron or Austin Reeves or Rui Hachimura, some of these guys want to do. I mean, he wants to get in the lane and then kick it out and try to simplify things for his teammates. So I think when you have both your 2 best players are kind of playing that way, it's just kind of a total crapshoot in terms of what other guys are going to show up offensively. And Buddy Hield, otherworldly shooter, but there's just not a whole lot else that he can offer you besides that shooting on the offensive end of the floor. And then, Kuminga, okay, is Kuminga going to be that efficient in the next game? Is Trace Jackson Davis going to have that many scoring opportunities in the next game? Is, maybe Moses Moody? Well, I think he's like 0 for 15 in his last 3 games. Is he going to show up to the party? So I think at some point when you're when you've got such bad ingredients, it's hard to consistently make things that are good when
sure.
The other chef, if you will, has got way better ingredients and
lipstick
more
on a pig here,
use.
man. I'm trying my best. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm glad we talked about that because it does make sense. And I think, what we've really landed on is like, again, both things can be true. And that's what it feels like in this current specific situation. Couple minutes left. Got to talk about what games 3 and 4 look like back in Golden State. That's all coming up though, right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. When your schedule gets packed with work projects and more, it's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, the non-negotiables like therapy, they become more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, maybe it's time to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple, too. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, before we get to this Game 3 preview here, I saw KOC, Vikings head coach, a little cameo there. Saw a couple other pretty decent, right, B celebrities. You were there, though, Jack. You were live at the Target Center. Did you see any random celebs, so to speak? Byron Buxton was there, by the way, up in the suite. Any random celebs tonight? Because I know the playoffs always brings out some faces that we normally don't see during the regular season.
Yeah, I think maybe the most random cameo we've gotten at Target Center all year. In my time covering the Wolves, we had a very animated Michael Irvin, Cowboys wide receiver.
Well, that's the only Michael Irvin you'll find. There's no non-animated Michael Irvin.
I don't know what the connection is to whether it's A-Rod or Laurie, but he's got that Dallas connection with his man Julius Randle, and was loving him up after Randle was interviewed post game. So yeah, it was cool to see that. But I was like walking past, Media Row, coming down from where my seat was to come back into the back here, and I just walked past it. I was like, no way, that's Michael. What is Michael Irvin doing here? Yeah,
is that Dallas Cowboys legend and 3-time Super Bowl winner Michael Irvin running that bang eight?
It sure was
across the hashes in Norv Turner's offense over there. Okay, I see you, Mike. I see you. Yeah, that's pretty fun, man. That's pretty good. Again, playoffs always bring out some big names. Game 3, Saturday, 7:30 tip. Again, now we got to see what it all looked like, Jack, without Steph Curry. So what are you looking for now in Game 3? Traveling to the West Coast to Golden State, biggest keys, biggest X factors, biggest adjustments for Finch, etc. What's on the top of your mind fresh off this Game 2 victory? Yeah,
the fact that it's going to be like 90 degrees in San Francisco, I was hoping to get out there and, get some nice, like 70 and sunny. So that's at the top of my mind right now.
If you haven't guessed, if you haven't figured out, Jack will be there. Jack will be there. He was in LA for what games? That was what, games 1 and 2. And you'll be right back out there, back in the Bay, baby. 90-degree weather. It sounds like. Good for you.
It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I think what I'm looking for most is just the Timberwolves to continue to play downhill. Right. I think that this team understands the task at hand in terms of how they have to wear down this Warriors team. And I think they also understand that this Warriors team is filled with dudes that have a bunch of pride. And Steve Kerr talked about it pregame, and that why he'll ride with guys like Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green and Kevon Looney and Steph, because those guys are 37, 36, 35, 34, but they all just live and die with every game in terms of how competitive they are and how much they love, just the opportunity to still be competing. And so I think you're not going to see that this Warriors team roll over, no matter how shorthanded they are. And if they don't have Steph Curry, because I think, these guys all adore Steph Curry and they want to do this for him and fight long enough to give him a chance to come back and win this series for the team. And so I think they know they're going to get the Warriors' best punch in terms of trying to muck it up and be physical and kind of drag the Wolves down into the mud. So I think if the Wolves can be the more physical and the more aggressive team like they were tonight, and then continue to shoot the ball at a rate that's a little bit more commensurate with how they shot over the course of the regular season, in the upper 30s, lower 40% range, I think they'll be in a good spot. Because again, tonight, we talked about it, Luke, the other night, Timberwolves won in almost every single area except the 3-point shot in Game 1. And they did the same thing tonight, except they dominated the 3-point line, 16 makes to 9 makes for Golden State. But outside of that, they won in the paint. They won in points off turnovers. They won in second chance points. They won in bench points, and they won in the fast break. And the only place they lost is at the free throw line by 1 made free throw. So
rebounds tonight, game 1 rebounds. Did they? I didn't.
I think they. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I know they didn't. They lost in total offensive rebounds, but they won in second chance points. So, I just think again, the two things at the top of my list for the Timberwolves. Number one, you got to keep the Warriors off the offensive glass, just with the way that they're crashing from the corners. It is just really important. And then number two, you just can't let the Warriors start to get out and run. I think we saw that a lot in game 1, where the Warriors got out and run a ton in transition and semi-transition. And that just can't happen tonight, or it can't happen moving forward in the rest of this series. And then just one other thing that I would like to hit on too. The Timberwolves last game forced 6 shot clock violations, and they forced the Warriors to take a shot with less than 4 seconds on the shot clock 19 times. The Warriors shot 2 for 19 in those situations. So it's just the more that this Wolves defense can force the Warriors offense to work deeper and deeper into the shot clock. I think the Warriors had 4 more shot clock violations tonight. 10 shot clock violations over a 2-game stretch in a playoff series is unheard of. So I think the further into the shot clock that the Timberwolves can force this Warriors half-court offense to work, I think it just totally plays into their hands, because the Warriors want to do everything early in the shot clock, like into that early offense, whether it's a dribble handoff or high pick and roll. But with guys like Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, they're just guys that are a little bit more methodical in the way that they set things up, especially with how to just a very quick trigger guy in Steph Curry. It's just tough to generate that early offense, early in the shot clock that's not necessarily in transition. So that's another thing to keep in mind, because in game 1, the Warriors were 18 to 42 from 3, but when you shrink that sample size down to only 3-point attempts they took that came off of a missed Timberwolves shot that they then rebounded, they were 11 of 13 from 3. 85% from 3. And then in all other 3-point shots, they were 7 of 29, which is less than 25%. So again, the more that you can force this Warriors team into the half court, the more that you can force them to use more and more of that shot clock, I think the better this Timberwolves team is going to have a chance to win and hopefully have a result that is much closer to what happened tonight than what happened in game 1.
Well, it was a lot funner to sit there and watch this game than game 1, I'll tell you that. T-Wolves bounce back in a big way, find their groove in game 2, 117-93. That was your final. We're all nighted up at 1 game apiece. As always, huge shout-out to all you guys, man. All you everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. All you guys come in the chat with us from game to game. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go follow Jack on X at GRBorman13, live from the Target Center throughout the playoffs. Again, he's going to Golden State for games 3 and 4. Again, game 3 Saturday, 7:30 tip. We'll catch you right here. Same time, same place. But until then, signing out.